Hello and welcome to my Wi-Fi cracking course. In this course we're going to talk mainly about cracking Wi-Fi passwords. All the attacks that we're going to talk about are practical attacks launched against actual routers that I have here at my lab. So all the attacks work and all of them are practical attacks. They are not theories, they're not proof of concept, they're 100% working attacks. So these attacks will allow us to obtain the passwords or the keys for different Wi-Fi networks, whether they use WEP or WPA or WPA2 encryption. The course is divided into three main parts. The first part is network basics. In this part we're just going to talk about how networks work, how devices communicate with each other in networks, and we're going to talk about the interfaces, the wireless cards, and the modes that we can use the wireless cards and how we can sniff packets that are sent around us in the air. Once we understand that and we can sniff packets in the air, we're going to move to cracking WEP encryption because it's an easier encryption to crack than WPA. So we're going to talk about how WEP works first, the theory behind cracking it. So we're going to talk about the weaknesses in WEP. And then we're going to discuss three methods to crack WEP encryption without the need to any connected devices or without the need to communicate with any of the people who are connected to these devices. We're not going to explain only one method because these methods might work or might not work depending on the distance between you and the router. It's going to depend on your wireless card, and it's going to depend on the hardware used inside the router. So we're going to talk about three methods so that at least one of these methods should work for you. After we do that, we're going to move to WPA. We're going to again understand how WPA works and what's the difference between WEP and WPA and what's the weakness in WPA that allow us to crack this encryption. WPA and WPA2 are similar, they can be cracked using the same methods. We're going to talk about this into more detail once we move to that part. And again, we're going to talk about four methods to crack WPA, going from slow to a quicker methods in cracking it. So, as I said before, there are three main encryption parts, WEP, WPA, and WPA2. WEP is the easiest one to crack. It takes minutes to be cracked and it's 100% sure that we can actually crack it. With WPA, we're gonna have, if WPS is enabled, then our chances of cracking it is much higher, so it's around, probably around 100% to crack the WPA if WPS feature is enabled. Again, more on this once we actually go to WPA, so this is just an introduction. Same with WPA2, if WPS is enabled, it's very easy to crack. If it's not, we're gonna have to use a dictionary attack or a word list or a rainbow table. We're gonna talk about all of that once we actually go to that section. So let's go ahead and start with network basics in the next lecture. Break into them. There's a few basics that we need to learn before we can do that. So basically, what is a network? A network is just a number of devices connected together. They are connected together for a reason, so that they can share data. This data can be files, can be resources. It can be, for example, your home network. Usually you use it to just access the internet, which is, you can look at it as a resource or as a source of data. So all networks, Wi-Fi or wired, achieve this sharing of data using the same principle. And that principle is, you need a device that acts as a server, and then all devices communicate with the server. So the server has access to the resource, and all the other devices on the network that are connected to this server, obviously, they can access the data from the server. So on most Wi-Fi networks, the server is the router, and all devices connect to this router and they access the internet through the router. So all the devices on the network have no access to the internet, as we can see in this diagram. The only device in the network that is connected to the internet is the Wi-Fi router. All the other devices, as we can see here, we have client 1 and 2 and 3, they have no access to the internet, but they can access it by connecting to the router. So whenever client 3, for example, if it wants to open google.com, it's gonna send a request to the router asking it, okay, I need google.com. The router is gonna go to the internet, it's gonna grab google.com and then forward it back to client number 3. So client number 3 does not have direct access to the internet. It has to go through the router, and the router is gonna bring the request and send the response back to client number 3. Now all of this data, requests and responses, are transferred through packets. So you can imagine all these arrows are a number of packets being sent between the clients and the router. And in Wi-Fi networks, these packets are sent into the air, so they're broadcasted. And if you're within range with these packets, then you can just sniff them, capture them, and read them, and you'll be able to see the information in there. So all this data, so whether it's usernames, passwords, videos, audio, music, chats, all of that is transferred as packets, and it's always transferred between the client and the router because the client has no access to the internet. So if you capture these packets, you'll be able to see all of this data that's transferred. You'll be able to see all these passwords, usernames, emails, videos, all that. You'll be able to capture it and read it on your device. MAC address. Each network card, whether it's Wi-Fi card or wired card, it has a physical static address assigned by the card manufacturer called the MAC address, Media Access Control. This MAC address is actually written on your card, and it's physical, so it never changes. For your card, for your specific card, for example, for your Wi-Fi card, it will never change. It will always be the same. The MAC address is used between devices to identify each other and to transfer packets in the right direction. This works by each packet has a source MAC and a destination MAC, and it travels from the source MAC to the destination MAC. Now, because the MAC address is static and it never changes, it can be used to trace you back and to identify your device. Also, since devices use MAC address to identify each other, so for example, you'll have some networks that only allow certain MAC addresses to connect to the network. They use a whitelist, or they can use a blacklist and blacklist your MAC address so that you cannot connect to that network. So changing your MAC address can help you either connect to the network by changing your MAC address to one that's in a whitelist, or it could let you bypass blacklists. So, as I said, it's physical and static, so the only way to change the MAC address is to change it in the RAM. So it will only be changed for this session. Once you restart your device, you have to change it again. So to do this, it's very simple. We're going to use a tool called MAC Changer. So let's see how we do that. So first of all, to get your Wi-Fi card name, just type in iwconfig, and it will show all wireless cards you have. So here ETH0 has no wireless extensions, and same with LO. And we can see that LAN 0 is my wireless card. So I'm just gonna disable the wireless card. So if config LAN 0 down, that's to disable the wireless card. Now we're going to change the MAC address. We're gonna use a tool called MAC Changer. So always with these tools, it's always a good idea to look at the help. So if you just go on MAC Changer, help, we'll see all the options that we can use with this tool. So you can use help and version to show the version, and help, show to show your current MAC address, E, so that it doesn't change the vendor bytes, it doesn't change the manufacturer of the MAC address. So another is just to try a random vendor MAC of the same kind. A is just to set a random vendor here, the capital A. P will reset to the original permanent MAC address. So if you change your MAC address and you want to use the old one, you can use P. Or will just give you a random MAC address, and L will just print the non-vendors that you can use. And M, actually, it'll help you pick your own MAC address. So you can, if there is a whitelist and I'll show you how you can see all connected devices. So if your target network, you can see there's, for example, 3 devices connected, and this network only allows these 3 devices connect. So you can just take one of those MAC addresses and change it and use it yourself, and then try to connect, and it will allow you to connect. So let's see how we change the MAC address. We're going to use MAC changer again, and I'm just going to use random to set up a random MAC address, and then we'll put the device name, which is LAN 0. So very simple, MAC changer random LAN 0. You can use the M to specify your own MAC address if you want. So I'm going to hit enter, and as you can see, my original one was this, and it's been changed to 98A4B095CA3. Okay, so now our wireless card is ready and we've changed its MAC address. Now we need to enable it again because we disabled it by typing ifconfig LAN 0 down. So we'll do the opposite. We're going to do ifconfig LAN 0 up. And that's it, the card is enabled and its MAC address has been changed. Let's just have a look on it. If you type in ifconfig LAN 0, now we can see the new MAC address showing up in here. So from the previous video, we know that MAC addresses are used so that they ensure each packet goes into the right direction. So it goes from the source to the destination MAC, which is specified in the packet. So if the MAC address is used to make sure that each packet gets delivered to the right person, how can we capture it? Because I said in the first video, I said we can sniff those packets, capture them, and read all the information that is in these packets. Now, if we're gonna do that, how can we do that if each packet is actually delivered to one person? Well, MAC address does ensure that each packet is sent to the right person, but that's only when your wireless card is working in the default mode, which is the managed mode. So in managed mode, your wireless card will only capture packets that are sent to it. It will only capture packets that have the destination MAC as your own MAC address. So let's say this again. In managed mode, in your default mode, your wireless card will only capture packets that are sent to your device. Now there is another mode called the monitor mode, and this mode allows us to capture any packet that is in our Wi-Fi range. Whether the packet is directed to our device or not, we will be able to capture it anyway. As long as it's within our Wi-Fi range, we will be able to capture it. So enabling monitor mode is very simple. We're going to use a tool called Airodump-ng, which is part of the Airodump-ng suite. Let's see how we do this. First, I'm going to disable my Wi-Fi card again, same way we did it when we were changing the MAC address. So it's just ifconfig LAN 0 down to disable it. Then we're going to use Airodump-ng to enable monitor mode. Airodump-ng. If you actually just type in Airodump-ng, it will show you the available wireless cards, and you can see I only have LAN 0. So I can say Airodump-ng start LAN 0. And basically when I say start LAN 0, I mean enable monitor mode on LAN 0. So Airodump created a new virtual wireless card called Mon0. So now we have LAN 0, we have 2 wireless cards. So if I type in Airodump-ng, you can see that I have 2 wireless cards. I have LAN 0, which is my actual physical wireless card. Mon0 is just a virtual wireless card created by Airodump-ng, and it has monitor mode enabled on it. So now if we go ifconfig LAN 0, so now if we go actually iwconfig LAN 0, you'll see that it's in managed mode. And if I go to Mon0, iwconfig, you'll see that Mon0 in monitor mode. So the card that we're going to be using now when we are not connected to any networks, and all the attacks that we're going to use now, we're going to use Mon0 because it's in monitor mode, and this mode allows us to capture any packet that is within our Wi-Fi range, even if the packet is not directed to our device. Now, if you want to stop monitor mode for any reason, all you have to do is just type in Airodump-ng stop -10. So -10 is the card that has monitor mode enabled on it, and I can stop it using this command. So as you can see here, it says removed. So if I type in Airodump-ng, I'll only see line 0 again. Okay, so now we have our Wi-Fi card in monitor mode. We can sniff all the packets that are within our Wi-Fi range, even though they're not directed to our device, and even without connecting to any network, even without knowing the password or username to the network. So what tool we're gonna use? We're gonna use a tool called Airodump-ng. It's part of the AirCrack suite. It's a packet sniffer, allows us to capture all the packets around us. We can run it against all the networks around us, so we'll collect any packet that are within our Wi-Fi range, or we can run it against a certain AP or access point, so we'll only be collecting packets that are coming from a certain Wi-Fi network. We'll see how we run the program first. First, you need your Wi-Fi card in monitor mode. I have it now in monitor mode, and the name of the Wi-Fi card in monitor mode, it's WLAN0. So we'll just clear this, and we will run Airodump-ng and -10. It's just as simple as that. -10 is the name of the Wi-Fi card that has monitor mode enabled on it. And now you can see it's starting to list all the networks around us. Another use of Airodump-ng is to identify all the networks around us and to identify all the connected devices to these networks. So I'm just gonna Control C now to stop sniffing, and we'll just have a quick look now. All the packets that we sniffed, now we didn't save them anywhere, so there was really no point of analyzing the packets, because we just ran it against all the access points around us to see what networks are around us and what they and gather information about these networks. So you can see like there is quite a good bit of networks around me. The BSS ID is the MAC address for the access point. So each, as we said, each network device has a MAC address, and it's here written under the BSS ID column. The PWR is the power, so it's how far is the access point from our Wi-Fi card. You can see the test IP, this is the AP, this is the test router that we will be running a few attacks against. It's here in my room, so it's very close to me. It's -34. You can see as you go down, the networks are further and further away from me. So the closer the network, the easier for you to get to sniff the packets, because obviously you're closer and the packets can be collected easier. Also, all the attacks that we're going to explain in the future, the closer the network to you, the more effective the attack, and the quicker you will gain your access or achieve your goal. Beacons is the signals that the AP send. So each access point send a certain type of packets to tell all the clients around it that I exist and I'm there. So even if the network was hidden, it will still send these beacons to tell everyone around that network is, I'm here, I'm an AP, I have my BSS ID to be this, and I'm running on this information. So this is the number of beacons that each access point is sending. The data is the number of useful packets that we have sniffed. We'll talk about this later when we start talking about web decrypting web encryption. So we'll just leave this for now. S is the number of data packets that we have collected in the past 10 seconds. So as you can see, we have 0 here, so 0 data packets in the past 10 seconds. Channel is the number of channel that the access point is broadcasting on. So each access point broadcasts on a certain channel. This is used so that there is no interference between access points that are beside each other. So say for example, I have an access point here, and like 5 meters from me there's another access point. if both of them are running on the same channel, there will be interference between those two access points, and the signal between them will be shorter, so the range of those access points will be shorter. So we use different channels so that there's no interference between the packets that are sent in the air. MB is the maximum speed supported by this access point, so it can go up to 54. INC is the encryption that's used in that access point, so we see the encryption here is WEP, here is WPA2, here is WEP again, we have WPA here, and if it's an open network you'll see OPN here in the encryption. Cipher is the cipher that's used to decrypt the packets, so for WEP it's WEP, but for WPA2 it can be CCNP, it could be TKIP. We'll talk about these later when we get into WPA cracking. Auth is the type of authentication that's required for this access point. So we have PSK, pre-shared key here, we have MGT for this one, and we'll talk about this later as well when we go to WPA cracking. In the previous video we saw how we can use Airodump-ng to see all the networks that are within our Wi-Fi range and collect information about these networks, such as the BSS ID, the channel, the distance between us and that access point, the encryption that it uses, and so on. Now after we do that, we'll see a certain network that we want to target, or a number of networks that we want to target. So once we have our target, it's more useful to run Airodump-ng on that network only, instead of running it on all the networks around us. So in this video we'll see how we can do that. So I have my output here from just running Airodump-ng 10 on all networks around me, and I'm going to target this network. So that's my home network, use PC62. I'm going to start sniffing on that network only, instead of sniffing on all networks around me. To do this, we're going to use the same program, so it's Airodump-ng, and then we're going to specify the channel. So I'm going to give the channel, and the channel here is number 2, as you can see here, and then I'm going to specify the BSS ID, which is the MAC address of the target network, and it's this. So we're going to copy paste it, and then I'm going to add a write option, and this tells Airodump-ng to log all the packets that it captures into a file, and the file name is, I'm going to call it now, so let's call it test UPC, and then we put the name of our Wi-Fi card with monitor mode, and it's 10. So Airodump-ng, same as the program that we used before. Channel, we put the channel of the target access point, and BSS ID, we put the MAC address of the target point, access point, and write, we put the file name that we want all the packets to be stored on, and then we have 10, the name of our Wi-Fi card with monitor mode. So I'm gonna hit enter, and as you can see, the only network that shows up is UPC62. We don't have any other networks with us, and we can now have a look on this section. In the previous video we had too many networks here, so we only had one section in Airodump-ng. This section was missing here, the second section. So the first section, as we saw in the previous video, contains all the access points that are within our Wi-Fi range, this section here. Now the second section contains all the clients that are associated with the access points here. So in here, this is not a network, this is a client, and it's connected to this network. We know that because we see the BSS ID here. That's the MAC address of the network that this client is connected to. So the MAC address here is the same as the MAC address here, so that means this client is connected to this network. Now the station is the MAC address of the client, so this is the MAC address of the device that is connected to the network. Power is the distance between us and this device. Rate is the maximum speed that this device is running on. Lost is the number of packets that we lost, we couldn't capture from the target device. and frames is the number of useful packets that we collected from that device. We'll talk more about frames and data, as I said, when we start talking about web cracking. So just want to show you now the two main parts again. So the first main part is the access points that are within our Wi-Fi range. The second main part of Airodump is the clients that are associated with these access points. We have the MAC address of the access point here and the MAC address of the actual client in here. Now I'm going to Control C. So now all the data has been logged into a file called test.upc. I'm going to use ls, which is a command to list files in Linux, and just list the files that Airodump created. So it's going to add a star after it. And we see Airodump automatically created four file formats. So in our command we only specified the file name as test.upc. You can see that Airodump automatically added a 01 to the file name. It adds this just in case there is another file that has the same name. And then we have 4 different file formats: the cap, CSV, Kismet, and Kismet XML. Let's go have a look on the files here in my home directory. So it should test. Yeah, that's it. So that's the files here, and they're in the home directory because my terminal is working in the home directory. If we go pwd, we see we're in the root directory. Okay, now we can, after we sniff those packets, we can use a program such as Wireshark to analyze these packets and see what information we gather. The problem is, in this specific network, it's using WPA encryption, so all the packets are encrypted and we won't be able to decrypt them unless we have the key. So we're going to talk about how we crack the key in section 2 of this course. For now, let's just and we're going to talk about how we use Wireshark in section 3 of this course. So I'm just going to run Wireshark just to give you a quick look on how the packets show up. So they're not going to be useful, they're all going to be encrypted, so they won't really be any use to us. So I'm going to go on the open file, test, yeah, that's the file name, and I opened it, and we see here we can get some information. So we can see, for example, here the source device is a Broadcom device, and it's going to it's just being broadcasted here. We can see here we have an Apple device communicating with the Broadcom. That's as much as you'll get. You'll get MAC addresses, you'll get maybe devices, manufacturers, very simple information. All this because the network is encrypted. We're going to talk about how we can decrypt it and how we can get very sensitive information after we connect to the network. If it's an open network, you can connect to it straight away and jump to part 3, where we're going to talk about these powerful attacks. For now, I just wanted to give you a quick look on how the packets look when the network is encrypted. Don't be scared of Wireshark. We're going to talk about it again in the 3rd section. We're going to explain everything about it. So for now, I just wanted to show you a quick look on what the packets look like. Deauthentication attacks. So we're still in our 1st section of the course, which means all the attacks that we're going to talk about are attacks that we can launch on any network that is within our Wi-Fi range, even if the network has encryption, even if it uses a key, and even if we don't have that key. So we don't have to connect to any network to launch these attacks. The deauthentication attack is very useful. It allows us to disconnect any device from any network that is within our Wi-Fi range. To do this, we're going to spoof our MAC address to the target client MAC address. So the target client is the client that we want to disconnect. We're going to pretend to be him, and we're going to send a deauthentication packet to the router. So we're going to tell the router, I want to disconnect from you. At the same time, we're going to spoof our MAC address to the access point MAC address, to the router's MAC address, and tell the target client, the client that we want to disconnect, we're going to tell him, you need to re-authenticate yourself. So when we do this, we're going to successfully disconnect the target client. So we're gonna pretend to be the target client and tell the access point that we need to disconnect from you, we want to disconnect from you. And then we're gonna pretend to be the access point and tell the client you need to reconnect, if you need to re-authenticate yourself. When we do that, the connection is lost. We're going to use a tool called Airodump-ng to do it. So let's see how we can do that. First of all, we're gonna need to run Airodump-ng on the target network, because we want to see which clients are connected to it. So we want to see what devices are connected to this network. So our first command is going to be Airodump-ng, and I'm not going to need the right option, so I'm just going to delete it here. So all I'm going to need is Airodump-ng channel. We put the channel of the target network, and BSSID, the MAC address of the target network, and we hit enter. And now we're sniffing on my target network, which is UPC62. So my target device is going to be this device. This method would work on any device, whether it's a Linux, Windows, Mac, if it's a phone, Android, iOS, it doesn't matter, they all use the same method of transparent packets, so it's going to work on any Wi-Fi enabled device. Let's make sure we have connection here. I'm just going to go to google.com. Make sure I'm connected to the internet. Okay, so we see now that Google is working perfectly. Let's go back here, and I'm gonna split the screen here. So we're gonna run Airodump-ng now to disassociate one of the devices from the network. We can run it to disassociate all devices, but I found when I do that, it doesn't really disassociate all of them because we have too many targets to disassociate. So I'm gonna choose one target, which is going to be this device, the device that we just saw. So it's going to be Airodump-ng, and then we're gonna Deauthentication Attack, and then we're gonna put the number of deauthentication packets that we're going to send. So I just put a very large number to keep the device disconnected. Then we're gonna put the target access point. So it's the MAC address of our target access point. This is it. And then we're gonna put the source or the client MAC address. That's the device that we want to disconnect, and it's this device here. So I put its MAC address there, and I'm just gonna put 10 my Wi-Fi card with monitor mode. So again, Airodump-ng, the auth, the number of packets, then we put the MAC address of the target AP, and then the MAC address of the device that we want to disconnect. Gonna hit enter, and Airodump-ng now send in the authentication packets. Let's go to the target device and see if we still have internet connection. And as you can see, we lost our connection, and it's now trying to reconnect. It's not going to be able to reconnect because we're still sending the authentication packets. So this device is successfully disconnected, and we can launch this attack on any network that we want without we don't need to know the username, we don't need to know the password or the key to that network. So everything we've done so far was without connecting to any network. All we had is a Wi-Fi card, and we had our Wi-Fi card in monitor mode, and we were just launching a number of attacks. We were able to gather information about all the access points around us. We were able to gather information about the clients that are connected to these access points. We were able to sniff packets from these clients and access points. One of the main problems that we faced was that if the network was using encryption, if it was using a key, then when we sniff the packets are not much use because the packets are going to be encrypted, and we need the key to decrypt those packets. So that's the motivation for this part of this course, to get the key for the target network so that we can decrypt its packet. Further than that, we'll be able to connect to the target network after we get its key, and then we'll be able to launch more powerful attacks, and we'll be able to gather more specific information about the client and about the access point. So this section we're going to talk about getting the key for different types of encryption. The most famous encryptions, we have WEP, WPA and WPA2. The first encryption that we're going to talk about breaking it is going to be WEP encryption, because it's the oldest one, it's the easiest one to break, but we still need to learn how to break it because you will see networks that still use WEP encryption. WEP encryption uses an algorithm called RC4. Each packet is encrypted at the access point and then it's sent to the air. Once the client receives it, since the client has the key, it will be able to decrypt the packet and read the information inside it. So very simple. The IP encrypts the packet, send it, client receive it, the client has the key, so the client decrypts it. Same way when the client sends the packet, it encrypt it, and then send it in the air. The access point receive it, the access point has the key, so it will decrypt the packet. So each packet that is sent into the air has a unique key stream. WEP ensures that the key stream is unique by using a 24-bit initialization vector. So the initialization vector is a random number. It's sent into each packet and it's sent into plain text. So this part, it's not encrypted. If you read the packet, you'll be able to read it in plain text. The problem with the IP or the initialization vector, it's very short. 24 bits is not that long. So in a busy network, there will be a very large number of packets sent into the air. This means the number of possibilities of random IVs will be exhausted, and we will have two packets that have the same initialization vector. So the initialization vector is a 24-bit random key. It's sent into the air in each packet, and it's sent into plain text as a plain text. In a busy network, we're gonna have a very large number of packets. This means that the possibilities of unique IVs will be exhausted, and if we are sniffing all these packets, we will be able to collect two packets that have the same initialization vector. Once we have two packets that have the same initialization vector, Airodump-ng can be used. It will use statistical attacks to determine the key stream, and after that it will be able to determine the WEP key. Okay, so from the above we know the more IVs or initialization vectors that we collect, the more likely that we'll successfully crack the WEP key. So our main goal now when we try to crack WEP is to collect as much IVs as we can, because once we have a large number of IVs and we're gonna have two packets that use the same IV, then Airodump-ng is more likely to be able to determine the key stream and the WEP key for the target network. In the next video we'll do that. We'll see how that actually works, and it should be easier to understand. Okay, so from the previous video we know that to crack a WEP key, all we have to do is sniff packets from the target network and gather as much IVs as possible. Once we do that, Airodump-ng will be able to use statistical attacks to determine the key stream and then the WEP key. It does this because when we have a large number of IVs, as I said, the IV is only a 24-bit number, so it can be exhausted easily in a busy network. So once we have two packets that have the same IV, then we can decrypt the key stream and the WEP key. Now when we have more than two packets, obviously the method is going to work better and our chances of breaking the key will be higher. So we're going to try to gather as much IVs as possible. Let's see the most basic case of cracking WEP key. First of all, I have my Wi-Fi card in monitor mode. So the first thing I'm going to try to do now is just see all the networks that are within my Wi-Fi range, and then I'm gonna target one of those networks. So we're gonna go Airodump-ng 10, just very basic, and the second network that came up is the network that we're gonna do our attacks on, so it's a test AP. So we're just gonna launch Airodump against this network now. So we're gonna put the BSS ID like we did before, just launching Airodump against this AP, and then I'm gonna put the channel number 2, and then I'm gonna add a write to store all the packets that we capture into a file, and let's call it basic test AP, and that's it. So Airodump-ng, BSS ID, MAC address, channel, and the file that we're gonna write stuff to, and our Wi-Fi card in monitor mode, just launching Airodump on a target network. Now as you can see, this target network that I have here is quite a busy one. You can see the data and the frames is going up quickly. Well, quick enough, not very quickly, but it was very quick at the start. It is a busy network, so we have a client here. This is the section where we see the clients. So this client is actually I have it actually playing video on YouTube, so that's why it's going up quick and slows down, So we're just trying to mimic active client here. So all we have to do now is just launch AirCrack, which is part of the AirCrack suite, against the file that Airodump has created for us. We can launch AirCrack against it even if we didn't stop Airodump, and it's gonna keep reading the file and read the new packets that Airodump is capturing here. So we're just gonna go AirCrack-ng, and we put the file name. So the file name was So this file is still being created, it's still getting larger and larger because it's getting more packets, but we can run AirCrack-ng with that file running, and then with Airodump running, and it's gonna keep getting updated, and it'll give us the password once it can crack it. So now AirCrack is working, and Airodump is collecting the packets for us. As you can see, AirCrack failed to determine the key within 5,000 ABs. So it's gonna, with 3,000 ABs, it's gonna wait until the ABs reach 5,000, and it's gonna try again. Now the number of ABs actually depends on the type of WEP. So there's two types of WEP encryption. There is 128 and there is a 46-bit. The only difference is the length of the key. So the 46-bit will require less number of IVs than the 128. Now the IVs, remember when we were talking about AirCrack, we said data is the number of useful packets. What I meant with that is the number of packets that have a unique IV or have a new IV. So the more packets we get with different IVs, the more our chances of cracking the WEP key. Now we're basically just gonna wait until AirCrack can successfully crack the WEP key. Okay, perfect. I'm just gonna Control-C Airodump now. And as you can see here, AirCrack successfully managed to get the key. So that's the WEP key for the target network. We were able to get it within 23,000 of data packets. That's because the target AP uses a 64-bit key. Let's see how we can use this key to connect to the network. So I'm just gonna copy it. I'm gonna go to Genie, and we're just gonna remove these dots and use the key like this. So now we can connect to the target network, and here we go. Let's see, test AP, and just gonna paste it here, connect. And as you can see, our connection has been established, so we successfully recovered the key, the web key for our target network. So I can just go to confirm, ping Google, and ping works, so we are successfully connected to the target network. So in the previous video we saw how easy it is to crack a web key in a busy network. So we had a busy network, we had a client that was watching videos all the time, and we saw how the data was increasing very quickly. Now the question is, or the problem that we're gonna face, is an access point that doesn't have any clients connected to it, or an access point that has a client connected to it but he's not using the internet as heavy as we saw in the previous video, maybe just reading articles or just going on Facebook or whatever, but not using as much data as we saw last time. So let me just show you an example of that. I'm just gonna run Airodump against the target access point, the test AP, just to have a look on an idle access point. So we have test AP now, the same access point that we used before. The only difference is that I've disconnected the device that was connected, and you can see here in the second area, the clients area, that there is no clients connected, and you can see the data is 0 and didn't even go to 1. So that's gonna be a problem that we're gonna face. We won't be able to crack the key like this with 0 data. So what we can do is we can inject packets into the traffic. When we inject packets into the traffic, we can force the AP to create new packets with new IV in them. We capture that IV and we do that again. That's the basic case that what we're gonna do. We're gonna explain 3 methods of doing this. We're gonna explain them in detail in the next videos. So for now we're just having a quick look on how packet injection is gonna work. But before we can inject packets into the air, we have to authenticate our device with the target access point. See, the way that access points work, they have a list of all the devices that are connected to them, and they ignore any packet that comes from a device that is not connected to them. So if a device that doesn't have the key tries to send a packet to your router will just ignore it. It won't even try to read it or see what's in there. So before we can inject packets to the router, we're gonna have to authenticate ourselves with the router. We're gonna use a method called fake authentication, and it's very simple. We're gonna have to do it before every time we try to inject. I'm gonna explain it now, and then in the future we're just gonna run the command straight away. So I have Airodump already running now. Let's see how we can fake authenticate ourselves. Remember when I talked about Airodump and we reached the auth, I said this is the type of authentication, and I said I'll come back for it later. So you see now the auth is, there's nothing here. Once we do the fake authentication, you're gonna see an OPN showing up here, which means we've successfully fake authenticated our device with the target access point. So to do this, we're gonna use AirPlay-ng. We're gonna use a fake auth attack. So we put the type of attack, and then we're gonna put the type of the number of packets that we want to send. So I'm just gonna do 0. Some people use a large number when they have when they're carrying attack that'll take like 5 or 10 minutes. But for me, I like to just use 0 and maybe do it later manually. So fake auth 0. We're gonna use the option A, the target MAC address. So I'm just gonna copy it from here and I'll paste it. That's done. We're gonna use H to put our MAC address so that our MAC address gets authenticated with the target network. So to get our MAC address, we're just gonna run the command ifconfig /0, and that's my MAC address. So I'm just gonna copy it. /0 is the name of my Wi-Fi card. You can put mon0 because they're the same card, so they have the same MAC address. I'm gonna paste it here, and then I'll put the name of my Wi-Fi card Mon0. So AirPlay-ng, the type of attack that we're trying to do a fake authentication attack to authenticate our MAC address so that we can inject packets into the target network. We're gonna send 0, which means one, do it once, and then A, we put the MAC address of the access point, and then H, we put the MAC address of the device that we want to do a fake authentication to, and that's my own wireless card. And then Mon0, name of the Wi-Fi card, and then I'm gonna hit enter. And as you can see, it said an authentication request, and it was successful, and association is successful now. So, and you can see here in the auth, it became an open network, and our client, this is my attacking device, showed up as if it's a client connected to the network. We're actually not connected, but we are authenticated with the network, and we have associated with the network, so we can inject packets into this access point now, because it will receive any request that we send it now. It's not gonna ignore our requests. In the next videos, we're gonna see how we can inject packets into the air and how we're gonna make this data go up very, very quickly. The access point now accepts packets that we send to it, because it's not going to ignore us, because we've successfully associated ourselves with it using a fake authentication attack. Now we are ready to inject packets into the access point and make the number of data increase very quickly so that we can decrypt the WEP key. So the first method of packet injection that we're going to talk about is ARP request replay. In this method, we're going to wait for an ARP packet, we're going to capture this packet, and we're going to inject it into the traffic. When we do that, the access point is going to be forced to create a new packet with a new IV. We're going to capture this new packet, inject it back again into the traffic to force the access point to create another packet with another IV. We're going to keep doing this until the number of data is high enough to crack the WEP key. Let's see how we do this in Kali Linux. So, first thing I'm gonna do is just launch Airodump-ng. I'm just gonna add a write to it, and let's call it this time ARP request reply test. And that's it running, and you can see that the target network has 0 data, so it has no clients associated with it, and there is no traffic going through, so it's not useful. We can't crack its key. And the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do a fake authentication now. And as you can see, the fake authentication was successful, and the auth has changed to open, so we can start injecting packets into this network, and it will accept our packets when we inject them. That's going to lead us to our third step, which is the ARP request reply step, where we will be injecting packets into the target network, forcing it to create new packets with new IVs. So the command is going to be, just paste this now, very similar to the previous one, just instead of fake auth, we're gonna say ARP replay. I have an extra AR here, so ARP replay. Yep. Okay, and then instead of A, we're gonna have V for BSSIV. So the first command here we did was just an association command, so that we can associate with the network and we can start injecting packets without being ignored. Here. The third one we're gonna do here is the command that we're gonna wait for an ARP packet, we're gonna capture it and then re-inject it in the air. Let me just associate myself again there, and I'm gonna launch this command. So in here, in the third section, Airodump-ng is just waiting for an ARP packet. Okay, as you can see, we've captured an ARP packet, and now it's injecting the ARP packet here. So it captured an ARP packet, it's injecting it in the traffic. The AP is creating another packet with a new IV. We're receiving it, injecting it again, and we're just doing this over and over again. You can see the number of data has already reached 9,000. I'm just gonna launch AirCrack-ng now. I think by the time I launch it, I'll be able to crack it. So I'm gonna AirCrack-ng, same command that we ran in the basic case. Let's just see lstar.cap, and it'll show up for us. Yeah, so that was it. So AirCrack-ng file name, and sure enough, here we see the web key, and we were able to crack it very easily. The number of data has reached 39,000 by now, so it's running up very quickly. Another method of increasing the number of data rapidly in a network that has no clients associated with it, or if it has very low traffic, is correct Chopchop Attack. In this method, instead of directly injecting the ARP packet that we capture, we're gonna try to determine the key stream for this packet. Once we do that, then we can create a new packet. So we're gonna forge a new packet and inject this new packet into the traffic. This will force the access point to create a new packet with a new IV. We're gonna capture it and inject it back into the traffic. We'll keep doing this until the number of data is high enough to crack the web key. So, the start of the attack is going to be very similar to the one in the previous video. The first thing we're going to do is launch Airodump against the target network. So I'm just going to call this Chopchop test. And here we go, we have our target network here. The second attack that we're gonna try to do is the fake authentication attack. Again, we do this so that the target doesn't ignore us. And as you can see, we've successfully associated with the target network. Now the third attack is gonna be our correct Chopchop attack, in which we're gonna try to capture a packet and determine its key stream. So it's going to be very similar to the fake authentication attack. I'm just going to paste that here. So instead of having fake auth, it's just going to be Chopchop. And then instead of A, we're going to have V for BSS ID. So Airodump-ng, Chopchop, the MAC address of the target network, and then my own MAC address, and then the name of the Wi-Fi card with monitor mode. We can get my own MAC address from ifconfig line 0, and then my MAC address will show up like this. So I'll just do another association with the target network. And then I'm gonna do my Chopchop attack. Now, Airodump-ng is just waiting for a packet. Once it captures that packet, it's gonna ask me, do I want to decrypt it and determine its key stream or not. So we're just gonna wait for it. I'm gonna say yes, please. And now it's working to try and determine the key stream for the target access point. Okay, now I've resumed the video. Just want to show you that we've only reached 86% but we can still actually use this key stream. It might work, it might not work, but we can still try. And sometimes I remember I had like 64% and I still was able to forge a packet and inject it and successfully inject it into the traffic. So let's try this. Now the key stream is saved into this file. So now the next step is to forge a fake packet. We're gonna do this using packet forge. We're gonna put -0 so that it creates an ARP packet for us, the MAC address of the target network and my own MAC address, same as this, A and H. So I'm just gonna copy and paste them. There we go. Then we're gonna put destination IP, and we're just gonna set it to 255, and then we're gonna set the source, and it's gonna be 255 again. That's just information that has to be there in the packet. And then we're gonna use the option Y to specify the name of the keystream file, and it's this file, as you can see, file that was created in the previous step. So I'm gonna paste that, and then the name of the forced packet. So what do we want it to be called? So I'm gonna call it Chopchop forced packet, and that should be in the W option, sorry, so that's the option. So let's just go again over the command. It's packet forge ng -0 to make an ARP packet, the MAC address of the target network, the MAC address of my Wi-Fi card, then we put the destination IP, source IP, and then we put the file that we created in the previous step, and the name of the forced packet that's going to be created. Now the next step is where we're going to inject this forced packet into the traffic and to cause the number of data to increase rapidly. So I'm just going to go to fake authenticate myself again, just in here, and then I'll just go clear this Airodump-ng to inject our fake packet into the target network. So -2 for the reply attack, and then or to choose the fake packet, and then we put the name of our Wi-Fi card. So -2 for replay, or the name of our packet, the forced packet, and -0. So I'm just gonna associate myself again, and I'm gonna hit enter here. It's gonna ask me, do I want to use this packet? I'm gonna say yes, and here we go. You can see the number of data increasing very quickly. Again, I only had 86% of the key stream. I wasn't able to decrypt the whole key stream, but the attack is still successful. That's why I've had good luck with this attack with networks that are far away, or with stubborn networks that the first method didn't work against. So all we have to do now is just wait for the data to reach around 20,000 and fire up AirCrack-ng again, as we did in the previous two videos, and it's gonna work. It's gonna get us the key straight away. I'm just gonna do it here. Do that here. Let's just do that. And the name of the file is Chopchop Attack. So it's Chopchop test 01. And here we go. As you can see, we got the key with 23,000 IVs. Basically, just I'm gonna go again through the steps of this method. So we capture the packet, we try to determine its key stream. We only determined 86%. We used that 86 to create a fake packet, and then we injected that fake packet into the air. The third injection method that we're going to talk about is the fragmentation attack. The fragmentation attack is very similar to the previous one, but in this attack we have to obtain 1500 bytes of the PRGA the pseudo random generation algorithm. Because we need to order the full 1500 bytes, this attack is we need to be closer to the target network to successfully run this attack, but it's much quicker than the correct Chopchop attack. So again, after we obtain the PRGA, we can use it to forge a new packet, and then we're going to inject this new forged packet into the traffic to increase the number of IBs very quickly. So the concept is very simple. We're gonna capture a packet, determine its PRGA, forge a new packet, and then inject that packet into the air. So let's see how we can do this. Again, first thing is going to be running Airodump against the target network. So I'm just gonna change the name here from Chopchop to Fragmentation. We're just gonna call it Fragment. Hit enter, and here we go. Airodump is launched on our target network. Second step, as always, is fake authentication, so that the access point doesn't ignore us and starts communicating with us. So we do that, and we see here we have successfully associated with the target network, and the authentication has changed to open, so that's very good. Third step is going to be our fragmentation attack step. It's very similar to the Chopchop attack. So you can see here that's my Chopchop code that I used, the Chopchop command, sorry. So it's exactly the same command, just instead of Chopchop I'm gonna say fragment. So it's airplay-ng fragment, B, the target address of my target network, and then H, the MAC address of my own network. Of my own Wi-Fi card. So I'm just gonna associate myself again and do the fragmentation attack. So it's waiting for a packet now. Once it captures that packet, it's gonna try to determine its PRGA. And here we go. We got a packet. So it's asking me, do I want to use this? I'm gonna say yes, please. Now it's trying to determine the PRGA. So that packet wasn't useful. It's just waiting for another packet to use. It's asking me, do I want to use this? I'm gonna say yes again. Again, that packet wasn't useful, so we're just waiting for another useful packet. I'm gonna reassociate myself in the meanwhile, and I'm gonna say yes. Okay, now this time this packet was useful and the key stream is saved to this file. Okay, now we're just gonna need to again, the same as we did in Chopchop, we're gonna use this key stream to create a forced packet. So I'm just gonna copy its name and I'm gonna use the same command. I'm just gonna clear this for you. And I'm gonna use the same command that we used with the Chopchop attack. The only difference is I'm gonna remove the Y, and I'm gonna put the name of the new key stream that we captured, and the name of the packet that we're gonna create, I'm gonna call it fragment first packet. So we're just gonna go over the command again. It's packet forge -0 to create an ARP packet. A, we put the target MAC address, H is my own MAC address, and then K and L are the destination and the source IP addresses. Y is the name of the key stream file, so it's the file that has been created from the previous step, and that's the name of it. And then W is the file name that's going to be created, that's going to contain the first packet, and it's going to be called fragment first packet. And it's telling us that it's been successfully written to this file. So again, just like the Chopchop attack, we're going to inject this new packet into the air, and this is going to be done using AirPlay-ng with the -2 option, the reply option. Just going to paste the name of my new first packet. So we got AirPlay-ng -2 for the replay, or the name of my first packet, and 10 is my Wi-Fi card with monitor mode. Before I do this, I'm gonna associate myself again, and then I'm gonna hit enter here. It's asking me, do I want to use this packet? I'm gonna say yes. And here we go, we can see the data is flying. We're injecting around 400 packets per second, and once this number is large enough, we're gonna be able to crack the key. I can just go here to AirCrack-ng. So it's gonna be AirCrack-ng fragment test. .cap, and here we go. We can see the key. That's the web key, and we have 30,000 IVs. So if we go back here, it's probably even more. It's 35,000, and the numbers are increasing quickly. So that was the 3 methods to inject packets into the air. There is more methods, but that's in my opinion the best 3 methods to increase the number of data into idle networks. This way we're able to crack any WEP encrypted network. We saw in previous videos how easy it is to crack WEP encrypted networks, even if there was no devices connected to the target network, and even if the target network was idle. We also explained a number of methods to inject packets into the traffic and cause the number of data to increase very rapidly, so that we can crack the WEP key in a very short period of time. Now in the next few tutorials we're going to talk about WPA encryption. This encryption was designed after WEP, and it was designed to address all the issues that made WEP so easy to crack. The main issue with WEP was the short initialization vector, which is sent as plain text in each packet. The short initialization vector meant that the possibilities of having a unique IV in each packet can be exhausted in active networks. So when we were injecting packets or in natural active networks, we will have more than 2 packets that have the same IV. When this happens, AirCrack-ng can use statistical attacks to determine the key stream and then determine the WEP key. In WPA, however, each packet is encrypted using a unique temporary key. This means that the number of data packets that we collect is irrelevant. Even if we were able to collect 1 million packets, these packets are not useful because they do not contain any information that can help us crack the WPA key. Now I'm talking about WPA, but it's the WPA2 is the same. It works by the same method, and it can be cracked using the same methods. The only difference between WPA and WPA2 is that WPA2 uses an algorithm called CCNP for encryption. So cracking WPA or WPA2 encrypted networks, it's not simple, especially that all the packets that are sent into the air are not useful for us, as they do not contain any information that can help us determine the WPA key. Before we get into cracking WPA and WPA2, there is a feature called WPS. it allows users and clients to connect to the network by a push of a button. So on Windows 8, and if you look on some Wi-Fi printers, they have a WPS button. So if you press that WPS button and you go to your router and press the WPS button there as well, or go to the configuration page and press the WPS button, the client, the printer or your Windows device will connect to the network without having to enter the key. So the purpose of using WPS, it's a feature that allows clients to connect to the network easily without having to enter the WPA key manually. So it's just a feature in routers. This feature works and authenticates the client based using an 8-digit long PIN. So it doesn't use the actual WPA key, it uses an 8-digit PIN. This is only digits and it's only 8 bits long, so there isn't too many possibilities for this, and if we use a brute force attack, we are guaranteed to guess this PIN. If we successfully guess this PIN, then we can use a tool called Reaver, which would calculate the WPA key from this PIN. So we're going to brute force the PIN, the 8-digit long PIN. Because it's only 8 digits, we're guaranteed to be able to brute force it successfully. Once we do that, we can calculate the WPA key using Reaver. Again, this is only a feature in routers. This flaw is not in WPA or WPA2 encryption. The problem is in the WPS feature. So let's see how we do this first. To look for access points that have WPS enabled, we're going to use a tool called Wash. So I'm just going to put Wash I10. So we have our test AP shown up here. That's the AP that we're going to use to crack. So this is actually running on WPA now. It's not using WEP as we saw in the previous videos. I can confirm that for you here. I'm just going to use Airodump. This step is not important. I'm just going to use it to show you that test AP is actually using WPA encryption. It's not WEP. So as you can see here, test is using WPA encryption. Let's just go back. So these are the access points that have WPS enabled, that have the WPS feature enabled. We can see the channel, the RSSI, which is the distance between us and the access point, the WPS version, and this WPS locked. Now, some routers, when you try to brute force the WPS pin, they lock after a few failed attempts. So if you try, for example, 4 wrong pins, they're gonna lock and not accept any pins for a certain amount of time. So if the WPS lock says yes here, then you can't actually use this attack now, so you need to wait for a little bit and come back to this access point. So we're gonna launch Reaver now. Reaver is going to brute force the WPS pin, and once it's able to find the WPS pin, it's going to work out the WPA key. Reaver supports pause and resume, so if you for example brute force 30% of the possibilities and cancel the attack, if you come back, you're gonna start again from 30,000. You're not gonna start from 0. So let's launch Reaver. We're gonna put B to choose the BSS ID or the MAC address of the target access point, and then C to choose the channel, which is 11, and then I and choose the Wi-Fi card with monitor mode, and that's 10. So very simple. Reaver, access point, BSS ID, channel, and then the Wi-Fi card with monitor mode. Gonna hit enter, and now Reaver associated with the target access point. It tried to determine the WPS pin. Now I have an easy pin, which is 12345670, and from that it was able to calculate my WPA key. So that's the WPA key, UIURWSXR, and that's just the name of the access point. So I can just come now and connect to my network, and if I put the key that we just found, show the password, and it's UAU or WSXR, connect, and as you can see, we connected successfully to the network. Now there's a few options that I'd like to show you for Reaver. I'm just gonna go Reaver, help, and that's all the options that you can use with Reaver. So as I said, some routers would lock after a few failed attempts. Therefore, you can use some of these advanced options to get Reaver to work against these access points. For example, you can use the delay option and specify the amount of time in seconds that Reaver should wait between each brute force attempt or each pin attempt. You can also use the lock delay to tell Reaver to wait, for example, 60 seconds after if the access points gets locked, then wait for 60 seconds and then continue your brute force attempt. You can use the fail wait as well to set the time that Reaver should wait after 10 failed attempts. You can use the OR option to tell Reaver to sleep after a certain amount, to sleep for a certain amount of seconds after a certain number of tries. You can set up the timeout. You can play with these options, the delay options and the timeout, the fail wait and all that if the access point was locking or was ignoring some of your brute force attempts. In the previous video, we saw how we can use the WPS feature in routers to crack the WPA key. This process is 100% guaranteed, so it should work on every WPS enabled network, and therefore if your target uses WPA or WPA2 encryption and it has WPAs enabled, then that should be the first method you try to crack the password with. If WPS was not enabled, however, we have to crack the actual WPA key. Now, we explained in previous video that in WPA each packet is encrypted using a unique temporary key, so it's not like WEP where IVs were repeated, and once we collect a large number of data packets with the same IV, we can calculate the WEP key. In WPA, each packet is encrypted using a unique IV, and it's a temporary unique IV, so that even if we collect 1 million packets, these packets will be not useful for us because they do not contain any information that can help us determine the actual WPA key. The only packets that contain some information that can help us determine the key are the handshake packets. These are 4 packets sent when a new device or a new client connects to the target network. So for example, at your home, when your own device connects to the network, so you have the password and you connect to it, a process called a 4-way handshake happens between your device and the access point. In this process, 4 packets called the handshake packets gets transferred between those 2 devices to authenticate your device with the access point. Using Airodump-ng, we can use a word list and test each password in this word list against the handshake. So, to crack WPA encrypted networks, we need 2 things. We need to capture the handshake and a word list that contains passwords to try each password in this word list against the handshake. So to crack a WPA key, the first thing we're gonna need is to capture the handshake. We're gonna capture the handshake using Airodump-ng, the same way that we used to use it with WEP encrypted networks. So we're gonna run Airodump. I'm just gonna run it on everything now to get the information about my target network. And this is my target. So it's Airodump-ng, BSSID, same way we used to run it against WEP networks. At the end of the day, we're only capturing packets using Airodump-ng, so it's doing the same job. So I'm gonna put the channel as well. and then I'm gonna write to a file, and then I'm gonna call the file test handshake, and then I'm gonna put the wireless card with monitor mode. So it's the same command we used to use when we were capturing packets for WEP networks. Airodump-ng, the SSID, we put the target access point, channel, we put the target channel, right, we put the name of the file that we're gonna store stuff in, and 10 is our Wi-Fi card with monitor mode. I'm gonna hit enter, and here we go. So we have our network now. This is a WPA encrypted network, and we have here a client connected to this network. So to capture the handshake, again, we said the handshake packets get sent every time a device connects to the target access point. So now we can just sit down and wait for a device to connect to the network. Once the device connects to the network, we're gonna capture the handshake. Or we can use something that we learned in section 1, which is the deauthentication attack. In the deauthentication attack, we were able to disassociate or disconnect any device from any network that is within our Wi-Fi range. If we do that for a very short period of time, we can disassociate this device from the network for 1 second, and then the device is going to try to connect back to the network automatically, so that even the person who's using the target device is not going to notice that, but his device will actually get disconnected and reconnected so quick that he won't notice it, but we will be able to capture the handshake packets. So again, we said the handshake gets sent every time a device connects to the target network. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a deauthentication attack the same way we did it in section 1. We're gonna disconnect this device from the network for a very short period of time, so that his system will reconnect him straight away without him noticing that, but we will be able to capture the handshake. So we're gonna just run a basic deauth attack using AirPlay-ng. We explained this in section 1. And in section 1 we put a very large number of packets when we were disconnecting our target. Now I'm only gonna put a small number, only 4 deauthentication packets. Then we're gonna put the MAC address of the target access point, and then I'm gonna put C to specify the client MAC address, the MAC address of the client that we want to disconnect, and then I'm gonna put my Wi-Fi card name, which is 10. So AirPlay-ng deauth, the name of the attack, 4 deauthentication packets to this access point and disconnect this device from it. Now I'm gonna hit enter, and just I have it's deauth. I missed a U here. And as you can see, we captured the WPA handshake here. And my target device was this, by the way. It didn't even change in here, it didn't tell me I was disconnected, because it will show a message when I get disconnected. So I didn't get any messages to be disconnected because I was disconnected for a very short period of time, and as a result the target person didn't even notice it, and we were able to capture the handshake, as you can see here, WPA handshake from this device. Now we can use a word list and run it against this handshake to try and determine the main WPA key. Okay, now that we've captured the handshake, all we need to do to crack the WPA key is to create a word list. A word list is just a list of words that AirCrack-ng is going to go through and try each one of these words against the handshake until it successfully determines the WPA key. So the better your word list is, the more your chances are of cracking the WPA key. If the password wasn't there in your word list file, you will not be able to determine the WPA key. Now I've attached a list of ready word lists that you can just download and use, or you can create your own word list using this video tutorial. We're going to use a tool called Crunch. It's basically just a script that you specify the characters that you want in the passwords, and it'll create all possible combinations of these passwords. So the format of the command of using crunch is crunch minimum maximum. The minimum is the minimum number of characters of the password that you want to create. So you can say I want a minimum of 4, 5, 6, whatever you want. Maximum is the maximum number of characters in the passwords. Characters, you're gonna specify the characters that are gonna be used to create the passwords. So you can specify A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the lower letters, and then you can write capital letters. You can put numbers, you can put symbols. So here you'll specify the characters that you want. And then T is very useful if you know part of the password. It's a pattern. So for example, if you're trying to guess a password and you've seen someone type in this password, so you know, for example, it starts with an A and ends with a B. So you can use the pattern option and tell Crunch to create passwords that always start with A and end with B, and it will put all possible combinations of the characters that you put in here. So for example, in this example, we have crunch. We're gonna create passwords of minimum of 6 characters and maximum of 8 characters. And the passwords are gonna be combinations of the characters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and these symbols. It's gonna be stored in a file called word list. And the pattern is this password or that are gonna be created, they're always gonna start with an A and they're always gonna end with B. So all the passwords that you're gonna see in the file are gonna always start with A and end with B, and they'll have all the possible combinations of the characters you specified here between the A and the B. So let's just run it here and create a sample word list. I'm gonna say crunch, and then we're gonna make a minimum of 6 and maximum of 6, or let's say minimum of 4, maximum of 6. And just so that it doesn't take a long time, I'm gonna make it short. I'm gonna put the characters, so I'm gonna just put 1, 2, 3 AB. I'm gonna store this in sample word list. So Crunch is gonna create a combination of passwords, minimum of 4 characters, maximum of 6 characters, and it's gonna create all possible combinations of 1, 2, 3 AB, and it's gonna store all that in a file called sample word list. Now we can read this file. We can just say cat sample word list, and we can see all the passwords that are stored in this file now. So that's all the passwords that Crunch created for us. So you can see it was 19,375 combinations possible from only 1, 2, 3 AB. Obviously, the bigger the password that you put, the more characters you put, the more passwords that you can make, and the more space they're gonna take. So let's just have a look on the pattern option. So we'll go crunch. Let's say a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 5. So all passwords, I want them to be 5 character long. And then I'll put the characters, which are 1, 2, 3 AB like before. And then I'm gonna add the T option, which is the pattern. And I'm gonna say I want a password start with an A and end with a B. And I want all possible combinations of my characters between the A and the B. And then we're gonna specify the output file, and let's call it pattern word list. And you can see here it's gonna create 125 passwords, and let's have a look on them. And as you can see here, it's always starting with an A and always ending with a B. So you can use Crunch now to create your word list, and in the next video we're gonna use the word list and the handshake file to determine the actual WPA key. Now that we've captured the handshake from our target access point and we have a word list ready to use, we can use AirCrack-ng to crack or determine the key for the target access point. AirCrack-ng is going to go through the word list file. It's going to combine each password with the name of our target access point to create a PMK. The PMK is created using a certain algorithm called the PBKDF2. So it's not like just combining the password and the ESS ID. It's encrypting them in a certain way, and then it's going to compare the PMK to the handshake. If the PMK was valid, then the password that was used is the password for the target access point. If it wasn't valid, then AirCrack-ng is just going to try the next password. So again, AirCrack-ng is going to go through the list. It's going to combine each password in the list with the name of the target access point to create a PMK. The PMK is compared with the handshake. If the PMK is valid, then that password is the password for the target access point. If it's not, then it's just going to try the next password. All this is going to be done using AirCrack-ng. Let's see how we do it. So it's going to be AirCrack-ng, the name of the file that contains the handshake, and that is test handshake01.cap, and then we'll put the -w and the name of the word list. So I have it called WPA word list. So AirCrack-ng, test the name of the file that contains the handshake, and then we have the name of the word list after the -w. I'm gonna hit enter, and now AirCrack-ng is gonna go through the list. As you can see, it's trying all the passwords. It's gonna combine each password with the name of the target access point to create a PMK, and then compare the PMK to the handshake. If the PMK is valid, then the password that was used to create the PMK is the password for the target access point. If the PMK is not, then it's just gonna try the next password. And as you can see, the key was found, and that's the same key that we were able to find when we attacked it using the WPS feature. It took 2 minutes and 16 seconds. So I want you to note this time, because in the next video we're gonna try a way that is quicker than this way to crack the password. So this was the basic way using a word list, and it took 2 minutes and 16 seconds to crack the password. Now the speed depends on how quick your processor and if you have any processes running that's making your computer a bit slower. We saw in the previous video how we can use AirCrack-ng to crack WPA encrypted passwords using a word list. In the previous video, AirCrack-ng went through our word list. It combined each password in the word list with the ESS ID to create the PMK using the PBK2 algorithm, and then compared the PMK to the handshake. If the PMK was valid, then the password that was used to create the PMK is the password we're looking for. If it's not, it just went to the next password and it created a PMK from it. So AirCrack-ng was creating the PMKs on the fly. The process of combining the password and the ESS ID to create the PMK takes a good bit of time, so it takes the most time of the cracking process. Therefore, in many scenarios, while we're waiting to capture the handshake, in many scenarios we'll have access points that doesn't have any clients connected to it. So if we have something like that, we have to wait until someone connects to the access point to capture the handshake. So while we're waiting, we can actually save time by converting our word list to a PMK list. Because as I said, converting the password to a PMK takes the most time. So while we're waiting, we can change each password in the list and create a new PMK list from our word list. And then once we capture the handshake, we can use our ready PMKs, and the cracking process is going to be much quicker. We're going to do this using Airodump-ng. So let's see how it works. Okay, so our first command is going to be to create a new database and import our word list in that database. So it's going to be Airodump-ng. We're going to create a new database, so let's call it test DB, and we're going to import passwords, and we're going to put the name of our word list, which is called WPA word list. So very simple. Airolib is the name of the program, test is the name of the database that we're going to create, and we're telling it to import passwords, and the passwords are going to be taken from a file called WPA word list. Gonna hit enter, and as you can see, a new database called test DB has been created, and the passwords have been imported into it. So the next command we're gonna do is we're gonna import our ESSID to the database. So I'm just gonna store the name of the ESSID of the target network into a file. I'm gonna do this using a Linux command, the echo command. So I'm just gonna say test AP. I'm gonna echo it to a file, and I'm gonna call the file test ESSID. So that's basically, so I'm gonna read it now. Cat test ESSID. That's just making sure that the name is there. So this command, I just created a file and I saved the word test AP in that file. That's the name of my target access point. And then here I just read the file to make sure that it actually contains test AP, and we can see that it contains test AP. Now I'm going to import this file into my database. So we're going to use the same command that we used before. The only difference is we're going to say we're importing ESSID this time, and the name of the file that contains the ESSIDs is test ESSID. So again, Airodump-ng test DB, that's the name of my database that I'm importing information to. Import is the command, we want to import stuff. ESSID is the name that we're telling it we want to import ESSID. And test ESSID is just a text file that contains the name of my target access point. I'm gonna hit enter, and that has been imported successfully. Now this is the step that takes the most time. We're gonna convert each password in the list. We're gonna combine it with the ESSID. So we're gonna create a list of PMKs from our word list. Again, we're gonna use Airodump-ng, and we're gonna put the name of the database that contains our word list, and then we're gonna tell it to batch, which is just convert each password, combine it with the ESSID, and create a PMK from each password in the list. Okay, so as you can see now, it computed all the PMKs. So that's the number of PMKs, that's the number of passwords that I have in my original list, and all of these passwords have been converted to PMKs, and they're stored in my database, which is testdb. And we can see that it took 366 seconds. So we're saving this time because the scenario that we're working on, we'd be only waiting for the handshake. So we can do this while we're waiting to capture the handshake. Once we have the handshake, then we can crack it straight away using the PMKs, the already done PMKs, which will be much quicker. Let's see how we do that. We're gonna use Airodump-ng, and we're gonna use the option R to specify our database, which is called testdb. And then we're gonna specify our handshake file, which is WPA or test handshake.cap. So very simple, Airodump-ng or specify the testdb, and then we're gonna specify the handshake file. Gonna hit enter, and as you can see, we cracked the password in much quicker. We cracked it in less than a second. So in the previous video it took 2 minutes and 16 seconds. Now it took less than 1 second. So it's much quicker, because instead of Airodump-ng converting each password to a PMK, we are using a list of already made PMKs. So this is useful if we are trying, if capturing the handshake is taking a while because there is no clients connected to the target network. We have our PMKs ready so that once we capture the handshake, we can crack it straight away. So in the previous two videos, we saw how we can use AirCrack-ng to crack the password, to crack the WPA key. The first method was using a word list straight through AirCrack-ng, and the second method was after we convert the passwords to PMKs. However, in both methods we were using our CPU to do the work. So in the first method, AirCrack-ng was using the CPU to calculate the PMKs. In the second video, we calculated the PMKs first, and then we used AirCrack-ng, and AirCrack-ng used the ready PMK database. But in both methods, we were using the CPU to do all the computations. GPUs are usually quicker than CPUs, therefore if you have a strong, powerful GPU, the cracking process can be much quicker if you use the GPU instead of the CPU. So we're gonna talk about a tool called Hashcat, which allows us to crack the key using the GPU, not the CPU. I'm gonna explain how to use the tool from Windows. You can use the tool from Linux. The only reason I'm gonna explain how to use it from Windows because most devices it's easier to find a driver for your graphics card for Windows than Linux. All graphic cards are supported on Windows, whereas you might have some trouble finding the driver for your graphics card for Linux. Therefore, I'm gonna talk about how to use Hashcat from Windows. So first of all, you're gonna need to download two files. First one is Hashcat, the tool that actually does the cracking, and the second one is Hashcat GUI, which is the graphical user interface for Hashcat. After we do that, we're gonna need to convert the handshake file to a HC-cap file. So the handshake was captured in a cap file as we saw in the previous videos. We have to convert it to a HC-cap file so that Hashcat can read this file. So we can do that from their website, hashcat.net. Let's see how we do that. So hashcat.net, and it's capped, HC-cap. And it's gonna ask us to browse to download the file, so we'll do that to upload the handshake file. So we have it called test handshake. Here we go, open, and then I'm gonna add the ESS ID, which is called test AP, and I'm gonna click convert, and it's converted the file, and it's allowing me to download HC-cap file that's ready to download. So I'm just gonna click OK, and that's been downloaded. I'm just gonna copy it to the desktop so it's easier to access it. Okay, and now we're gonna run Hashcat. Just double click it, the Hashcat GUI, gonna click run, and we're gonna navigate to OCL Hashcat here. So first thing, we're gonna choose our hash file, so that's the handshake file that we just downloaded, the HC-cap one, and that's it here. So I'm just gonna open it, that's done. Now we're gonna choose the encryption that we want to decrypt, and it's WPA WPA2, and the binary file you're gonna have to, as I said, we're gonna have to download two files. The first file here is that's gonna contain the binary, the actual program that does the decryption, and or the word list attack, and then the second one is just the GUI. So we're actually in the GUI right now, and we have to specify the binary. So you browse and you go to wherever you extracted your binary, and you click the binary file. So I'm going to use the 64-bit because I have a 64-bit computer. I'm going to click open, and everything's ready now. So you choose your HC-cap file, you choose the encryption, you put the binary, and then you can click on reverse engineer to get it to work. Actually, I should pick the 32 version and click it, and as you can see I get an error because I actually don't have a graphics card in this computer. So I just made this video to let you know, or to show you how you can use Hashcat. Now if you have a graphics card and if the driver is installed, it should work for you, but for me I don't even have a graphics card, so that's why it's complaining about OpenCL. So that's it. Using the GPU should be much quicker than the CPU. So if you have one, if you have a powerful one, then that's gonna help you a lot with the cracking process, and it's gonna speed it up by a huge amount. Now we've talked about 3 different methods of cracking the WPA key. Now there's other methods, there's a lot of methods to do that. There's also online services that you can just upload your handshake file, and they have huge word lists, and they have hypercomputers that will try to crack your password by running those huge word lists against your handshake file. They're actually really good, those services, because their computers are very fast, they're hypercomputers, and their word lists are huge. So you can also try them if you're stuck, if you couldn't find the key by your local machine or using your local word list.